My Gavan and Melanine, and well met indeed. I am Arahigaladirathon, the head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome back to Divide and Conquer with another faction overview, this time of one of my, again, favourite factions, the Vale of Dorwinion. Ah, Dorwinion. It's been such a long time since I've played with Dorwinion, but here we are. Now, before I begin, first thing to just mention, I'll post it in the description below, so do click on the link, is all of these little resources that you see dotted around the map, particularly heavily in Dorwinion, actually, have all since been edited by the Elite Dwarf to no longer represent an actual thing. So that represents, obviously, a glass of wine, or a, whatever you call that, a chalice of wine. Silk is a couple of rolls of silk. They now actually fit to the terrain better, like the village does, in that they now represent that kind of location. So the wine has been changed to a vineyard, the silk's changed to a textile silk plantation, or whatever, wherever silk, whatever it's called, where silk comes from. That's changed as well to a trapper, that's changed to a lumberjack, all lots of things like that. So every single one of them has now changed to fit the map better. And indeed, the villages themselves have been edited. Additionally, the Hobbit villages have been edited, and Hobbiton has been given a new, unique look. So, all very interesting and entertaining, and the link is in the description below, so go and check that out. It will most likely feature in the next faction overview as well, because I'm sure I will have copied it onto my own computer by next week. So I do hope you enjoyed the Age of Empires video. This video is obviously a day later, so you are watching this video on the 6th of February 2017. If you have any questions or comments about this video, make sure you remember the date. But let's kick off with Dorwinion then. So the size of your initial domain. Let's zoom out and you can see the whole thing. Dorwinion is here, in what kind of looks like an alien head. Yeah, is what I've always kind of thought. If you zoom out, and if you take the mountains out, it looks a little bit like a very thin neck and then a massive head. But anyway, Dorwinion isn't particularly large. You start with 3 regions. Caros Valathrim, the city of the folk of the sea, or the city of the folk of the coast. Caros Sant, which means the city of gardens, and Sant-Anwy, which means western gardens. Now, in terms of your initial army to go along with your towns, though, not very large at all. You've got your Vine Regent Howin and a couple of units of Thorn. In Sant-Anwy, you've got a couple of other units of Thorn. So you've got a full roster there of Thorn, so you haven't got any cavalry. And then down in the south, you've got your Vineyard Shield Bearers, the militia. However, nestled in this elven fort up here, which is why it blends into the trees so well, is a small contingent of elves. 2 units of Avari Guard, Avari Shadows, and Nerway. The Avarin High Councillor. Representative to Dorwinion. So you get a few elves up there to play with, but mostly you just get humans. So not a very large starting army, but do remember that the elves in the early game are very, very powerful. But we will cover the units more when we go over and look at the units side of the video. So then, leader, capital, unique bodyguards, and diplomat. Your capital is Caros Sant, and there you will find your leader, Vine Regent Howin, who looks like that. He has gold-plated armor with a purple cape. That's Vine Regent Howin, your leader. Over in Sant-Anwy, you'll find your heir, Vine Lord Swine. Or Swain, most likely Swain. And he has the standard Dorwinion general look. And then finally, this is what a captain looks like. And there's your captain. So reasonably similar between the two, but obviously the generals tend to always have stars. And the general has gold armor, and the captain does not. And finally, down in Caros Valathrim, 4th win is also a standard general. So, your leader is Vine Regent Howin, your heir is Vine Lord Swain, and your capital is Caros Sant. This is also where your diplomat comes from the Vintner Court, which allows you to recruit your diplomat, reduces building costs around the world. Although I believe that effect doesn't actually work, so we're having to rework that once more. So, don't pay attention to that, sadly. No, that is the one. Yeah, yeah. I won't go into it, but that doesn't actually work. So in version 2.0, that'll have to be edited. But so that's where your diplomat comes from as well. The next nearest diplomat comes from the Tent of the Khan in Mistrand, or Mistrand. So you have to head south to get that. So Rebel expansion at the start of the game. Where are you going to go? Well, as you can see, we're at turn 2 as usual, and the Rebel regions are all to your north and west. In fact, all of Ravanion is pretty much up for the grabs. There's Othelbed, Ostinaru, Carvarad, Dorthalu, Bersalthis, Råberg, and Ilanen. All of those are available to you. You can also cross the river. I can't remember where it is. Can't get anywhere near enough. It's somewhere around there. You can cross the river and head up to try and get Bersagath. Or indeed try and beat Rune to Wintirian Eor, but you won't. They always get that almost straight away. So consider that a runic province, really. And speaking of runic, there's one of the Middle Eastern unique forts for you. So your rebel expansion is north and west. But then inevitably, obviously, you're going to have to come into contact with someone. And your diplomacy, as it stands at the start, is very neutral. You're allied to both Dale and the Woodland Realm, owing to your selling them wine up the river running, the Dorwinion. So you've got the Woodland Realm and Dale are on your side. However, runes start as neutral. So if you want to, you can try and polarize an alliance with them, but they do start a war with Dale. So if you want to ally with Rune, you've got to break your alliance with Dale. Yeah, but it's possible if you want to go that way. I mean, it's feasible. Of course, Rune are your immediate neighbour and your immediate threat. In almost all circumstances, they attack you. So be prepared to defend against them. And we'll talk a bit more about that in the video unit side as well, because a few people are reporting that they're struggling with Dorwinion. So those are your immediate neighbours in diplomacy. Further along the line, you will have to deal with Dol Guldur unless they are beaten back by the elves and the forces of the Anduin. Highly unlikely, however. Dorwinion are very territorial, imperialistic, you might say, in their claims of Ravanian, and you will normally butt heads at some point. Of course, a natural enemy for you as well is Mordor. And speaking of, let's move on to your faction victory conditions. You need to hold 30 regions, including your capital, and you need to defeat Rune and Mordor. So you simply need to take Mistrand, and then kill Rune, kill the Easterlings, and then you need to take Barad-dûr and destroy Mordor. And of course, to destroy Mordor, you need to drop the ring into Mount Doom, which has always been the requirement. Given the fact that the ring script is reasonably breaking, I might ask one of our scripters to look at that and basically sever the link between needing to destroy the ring, because if the ring is going to be, if the graphic problem with that is only going to get worse as computers get better, and this is always going to just cause us grief, then you should still at least be able to destroy Mordor by just wiping Mordor out. And then of course Sauron's spirit endures, but his spirit can endure up in Forodwaith for as long as it wants. But because Mordor and the Pope aren't the same faction, so the papacy are separate from Mordor, so Sauron is actually not technically part of Mordor. So anyway, that's all by the by. It's something I might look to do for version 2.0, because I personally think it'd be better, and it just it's just a way to get around the problems with the ring. So essentially it might be that if Mordor are really powerful and the ring script works for you, you can drop the ring in to just basically take them out of the game without having to fight them properly. Or if you are like Dorwinion, and it's really quite tricky to get the ring for Dorwinion because it normally spawns quite far away, then you should be able to just come in and wipe Mordor out like as white paint on a blue wall. You should be able to just take them away. So that's your victory conditions, Rune and Mordor. So it's not advisable to ally with the Easterlings, but do remember that the victory conditions are purely advisory, really. All you get for actually winning is a video saying, well done, you've won, and then it asks if you want to carry on and control the whole world. So the victory conditions are, if you don't meet them in the time as well, I should have said this in the FAQ, if you don't meet the victory conditions in the time, it doesn't end the game for you. It just means you can never see that victory message pop up. And that's literally all it is. It's literally just a message that says, well done, you've won. And you get a little video, if it's one of the original factions, of just everyone cheering. But if you don't meet the victory conditions within the time limit, the game doesn't end. You can still just carry on. So if world domination is your thing, then ignore the victory conditions, ignore the time limit, and just have fun fighting every type of unit in the game. But let's move on to economy and buildings. Well, Dorwinion are one of the nations who are quite famous for being wealthy in Divide and Conquer. Of course, Dorwinion in the lore we know very little about, but they do sell wine, so they likely are very wealthy, hence why we've added that as a feature. It's very easy to make money as Dorwinion. And if you can get trade partners trading with almost anyone, you're in the money. Particularly given, as you can see, they've got quite a lot of wine in their region, and wine is one of the more expensive resources. So these two provinces are very wealthy, given by the fact that's 1,200 at game start, and for a castle 618 is very, very good. Although I believe that's a stronghold. That's the highest tier of castle, so that can never upgrade. It's as high as it will go, which is useful to you. So economy-wise, it's very easy to make money. You don't have any restrictions in version 1.2. You can upgrade all your castles and you can upgrade all your towns. So Coruscant is currently only a large town. There are 2 levels above that. And Carisfor-Lathrim is currently a castle, so it can go up 1 more to the same size as Santonui. Now, in terms of buildings, Dorwinion are very unique. well, not necessarily all that unique, but they are unique in that they get a building that you can't see, sadly, until after the barracks event. But they get 2 unique buildings, one in Karasant and one in Santanwi. And the Santanwi one is a military-style building, and it basically just gives you... It helps focus this into a military centre, and it gives you melee weapon upgrades and experience to troops. And you can get that in Santanwi. And in Karasant, you get a building that is totally dedicated to economy, given how the Dorwinion are a very money-orientated faction. You get a unique building in Karasant. Both of them come after the barracks event. You get a unique building... There it is, a wine depository. That just increases the amount of money and the free upkeep you can get in Karasant. So it makes Karasant a bit more wealthy, and you get a building in Santanwi that makes Santanwi a bit more military. However, you can't get that one until after the barracks event, unfortunately. Now, in terms of guilds, there's a Warriors Guild standard for Dorwinion, which is Weaponsmith and then a Varensmith. Interesting to note that you don't actually need to side with the elves to get the Varensmith's Guild. That they give you that one at least. Warrior Guild's still there as well. And in Karasant, I believe there's also the Merchants Guild, yeah. So, as you might imagine, Dorwinion get merchant-orientated and themed buildings. So, oh, actually, no, I think it is tied to the script, so that bounces us onto the next one quite nicely. Those 2 buildings are dependent on who you side with. They aren't both available. And allow me to explain somewhat. Or possibly the depository is available regardless of what you do. No, yeah, you have to side, because otherwise you'd be able to build it right now. And as you can see, you can't. So yeah, Dorwinion is unique because it's got a script. Most people know about it, but here we are to talk about it. The script is to choose between Northmen and Avari. And the Avari, as a brief backstory, are the elves who never went on the Great Journey. Essentially, or basically at the beginning of time, the beginning, when the elves first awoke, a little while after that, in the grand scheme of things, they all then buggered off west following Arome, one of the Valar. But some of the elves refused this journey. They stayed behind. They became known as the Avari, or Dark Elves. And now, it's not Dark Elves as in evil. It's dark as in they never saw the light of the 2 trees of Aman way off to the far west. So they are literally dark, as in they are in the dark, not they are dark of soul. And so the Avari stayed behind. But there's some sort of speculation, and mostly fan fiction, that suggests they may have crept west themselves anyway, and come to settle... a small section of them come to settle in Dorwinion. So to give Dorwinion a unique flavour, because otherwise it's basically every campaign is just fight, run, defeat, Mordor, win, we've got this choice. And the choice is broken down into 2 clear concepts. You choose the elves or you choose the humans. And if you choose humans, you side with 2 things. Number 1, economy, and number 2, more units. And if you side with elves, you side with war and with less but elite units. And that's essentially all the change does. Your culture does not change. I should make that very clear. Because people always say, I sided with the elves, but I'm still Northman. Your culture doesn't change to Elven, because that would cause a ton of problems. And it's just not really worth it. And it would also, unfortunately, mean that all of your regions that were Northmen, if you suddenly swapped culture to elves, which can be done in the files, we can make you swap to the elves, but you'd swap to whatever the elven population is there, so you'd end up seeing mass riots and hatred across your realm because you all of a sudden are a different culture to what you currently were. So it can cause a little bit of a problem. But anyway, it's also just not worth it. So you don't change culture, but you do side with the elves and you side with the humans. So if you side with the humans, with the Northmen, the choice is very, very clear, and it comes around either just before or just after the barracks event. So you're looking at around turn 60 odd. If you side with the humans, you get the wine depository in Karasant, and then you get the upgrade to that as well. There's a second tier to that. And you get humans. And as I say, the humans give you, I think it's something like maybe 8 or 7 extra units. But not only do you have more choice, they're also available more. So their replenishment time is lower, their recruitment time is lower. So if you side with the humans, you can just get a large army. And they are still very, very good. You're still, like, your human choices are still comparable with about Dale, if not maybe slightly better. So that's the human choice. Now, if you side with the elves, you only get about 4 or 5 extra units. I think 5? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 5. But they're available in the same sort of time that elves are available. So there's probably 20 odd turns between the training of your elites, maybe 15 to 17 turns between the training of the basic elves, and the basic elves are the shadows and the guard. So choosing the elves gets you really elite units, but you don't get very many of them. So you have smaller, more powerful armies. Now, and the visuals on both sides look really cool, and the amount of like fan fictiony kind of lore that I've thrown into Dorwinion as well helps them at least all pin together. So the descriptions of the units all like linked together with Noe being the High Counselor and stuff, and it's all just a good little read if you do get the chance. So that's the Dorwinion script. Another thing you could possibly call script is you can train the Athala Rangers, which are technically a Dalian unit, but you can train the Athala Rangers as Dorwinion. You get them in the regions that border the river running, the Kelduin, which isn't really a script, but I'm not sure that they'll appear in the unit half, so I'll talk about that now. So there you go. Now, moving on to garrison script, then you get a garrison in all three of these regions. You will also get a garrison, regardless of the town size, in Berkalpis, Grasgard, Esgaroth, and Dale, because you share their culture. Likewise, if you were to make it to Rohan, you'd get a garrison in all of these starting Rohirrim provinces. And, believe it or not, you'd get a garrison in Bree and the Shire if you made your way over there. Elsewhere, of course, you won't get a garrison anywhere that doesn't share your culture at game start, and if it's any of the rebel regions that you can see at this moment on the map, you will need to upgrade all of those regions once in order to then get a garrison there. But as usual, you never get a garrison in the homeland of your enemies. They will never fight for you, regardless, unfortunately, of who's attacking them. So, that's garrison and that's script. So then what has changed significantly about the map? I bet you can't not see that alien head now. What can I tell you that's different from 0.52? Well, the major difference between 0.52 and now is the splitting up of Karvarad. Karvarad used to be this entire region, and it is now split into these three. So Dorthalu and Råberg were added to make the fighting here more interesting, and Karvarad was reduced in size. And that's one of the key changes, really. In fact, I believe that's the only change. Possibly the addition of that fort, maybe. I can't remember if that one was there in 0.52. But another key change is the Isle of Nibur and the town of Nibur-Ka. This region didn't used to exist in 0.52, but it does now. And as Dorwinion, you are one of the few nations that can train boats. You can only train the basic boat, and you can only train it in certain provinces. So, you can't train... The point and the key here is that Dorwinion, Dale, and Rune, you can't train seaworthy vessels. You can only train river and lake vessels. So you only get boats in and around the Sea of Rune and the River Running. Now, I say the Sea of Rune. It is obviously a large sea, but it's not an actual sea. It's not... It's only an inland lake. So you don't get vessels that can go on the sea. So if you make it to the coast, you can't build your ships there. You can only build river-going vessels, and by extension, the lake. Although it is a big old lake, so it doesn't really hold up, but our will is law. So then on to tips and difficulty with Dorwinion. Well, Dorwinion, it can be a struggle in the early game because of one thing, and that is the Loke Rim Bodyguard. The bodyguard of the Easterlings is really powerful. And I mean really powerful. It can shred whole battalions of your unit in a single charge. And it's your biggest threat early game. Additionally, the leader of Rune comes with a bodyguard of the key chariots. And chariots are such a mix. Chariots, I think, and as does about 50% of the community, think are really easy to kill. They're really quite weak in certain situations. You just bog them down and shoot them down with crossbows, or you send anything with armor piercing or with a pike against them and they're gone. However, another 50% of the community really struggle with fighting the chariots. So that's depends on who you are, is how difficult you're going to find the chariots. But the bodyguard are always a threat. They can be dealt with, but they are a threat. So Dorwinion's early games, in terms of tips, is to fight bridge battles. You need to absolutely negate the advantage that the Easterling bodyguard brings them, because its power is outrageous. So Caras Falatharim becomes a very key choke point, and the bridges around it are really useful. So much so, given how much I enjoy Dorwinion, now I know how to edit the map. I may even extend the rivers so that you are forced to fight bridge battles, but that might make the campaign too easy. Additionally, do try and snap up Karvarad as fast as possible because it's a large town, so it brings in a lot of money. Don't worry about Råberg or Dorthalu as much, but you can head out to them if you really want to because you'll stop Dol Guldur getting them. But you don't want to invite Dol Guldur to war too early because if you fight both of them in the early game, you'll struggle. You really will struggle. North on this side, though, what you want to try and do is egg Dale on. So if possible, take Bersergath and either then sell it to them or just give it to them. Or just send some scouts up here, check that Dale are coming down or the dwarves are coming down. And try and encourage that. I don't exactly know how you're going to try and encourage that. But normally it happens naturally. Dale normally deals with the northern side. Now, when I say deals with, what I mean is Dale stalemates with Rune for about maybe 20 odd turns, and then the Eastlings start getting the upper hand. So you are going to be a key player, or everyone around you will die. Dale can't hold the Eastlings on their own. The dwarves don't tend to actually come this way, because even though these two are connected, sometimes they take Mariah on, but it's rare that they then get more involved. So dwarves tend to always go west, so you can't necessarily rely on them. So it's you and Dale, and you will need to be the key player. So try and fight bridge battles to negate the power of the Easterling general. Use your own quite powerful cavalry to deal with the annoying Balkoth tribesmen who will continuously throw their javelins at you. And if possible, try and rush. I know it's a cheap, cheesy tactic, but there are two nations in the game that unless you rush them, they will snowball so hard that you'll really struggle. And those are, in my opinion, Mordor and the Easterlings. If you allow the Easterlings to build up momentum, and especially if you allow them to get to the barracks event, then you're really going to struggle. They will gain so much momentum, and they will attack you so much. I know you start neutral, but you're their natural enemy. You're the only thing standing between them and the rest of the world, so they normally always attack you. So try and rush them. Try and gather an army. Try and penetrate through to Mistrand. Even if you just raid it, capture it, destroy everything, then abandon it. That will go a long way to supporting your cause. Because Mistrand is their capital, but Mistrand is a city. So it can upgrade once more, but your capital can upgrade twice more. So the Eastlings arguably, well, not arguably, definitely at the beginning have more money than you. So you're really up against it. So try and fight bridge battles. Try and rush, and immediately try and get Carverad. Try and get that money there. So that's the Dorwinion on the campaign map. I hope this time I haven't missed anything. As I say, they're one of my favourite factions, so let's see what their units look like on the other side. Welcome to the battle map side. So, a quick scan of Dorwinion. Unfortunately, this one is broken up a little, so a quick scan doesn't really work. So, whereas normally these are all archers, these are all cav, this time these are elves and these are the human choice. There's your general, and this guy in the middle is available to both. And all these at the front are available to both. So, regardless of whether you choose elven or human, you'll get all of those in Team 1, which is everything in green at the moment, and you can see the images down there. The humans get these units over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I didn't realise they were that close together. And the elves get 5. So if you play as the elves, you get 5 additional units, but their replenishment is really slow. So it takes a long time to make an army out of them. Whereas if you play as the humans, you get 6 additional units, and they replenish very quickly. So they quickly take over and replace the lower tier militia. Whereas when you play as the elves, you frequently have to spatter lower tier militia in amongst your army in order to bulk up the army and make it full. So there is that payoff. But the elves do focus more on warfare, and the humans do focus more on money as well. So if you've already got a lot of money, it does naturally tend to take you over to the elves. So this is the roster. In the early game, there are 2 units of absolute pure militia, and they are your vineyard units. The only unit that people still sometimes moan about how they look, and one of the last units left that Zarathos created. Well, no, he created a great deal of it, but Hummingbird has since edited an awful lot. But you get Vineyard Bowmen and Vineyard Shield Bearers. And they are really trash. They are utter trash. My Playing Age of Empires Too Much has labelled this unit now. So, not very good stats, as you can see there. Their morale is poor. Their morale response is poor. They're really poor. They're like Orc level units. They really are. And this is kind of ties in with the theme of Dorwinion being sort of almost mercenary-ish and being so vested in economy and paying other people to do their defending that when they have to defend themselves, they're just weak, rabble-like people. So that's where that lower comes in. But mustered by your great Vine Regent and the Vintner Court come the Thorn units in the second tier. Now they also have a very interesting description that tells you why they're called Thorn. And they come in 4 or now 5 battalions with 1.2. So there's a new unit to show you straight away. But the first unit and one of your key units are the Thorn Crossbowmen. And that is because crossbows in DaC are effective against armour, which means these are your chariot and bodyguard killers. They fire really slowly, their range is worse than archers, and because they take ages to reload, they are tricky to use, but a full volley from them into the Lokrim bodyguards will laugh off the Lokrim. Supporting them and keeping the Lokrim back as well, as I say, much of Dorwinion's early game is tailored to defeating those bloody bodyguards. You get the Thorn Guard. Now, these are a sort of pike, but they don't have the full-length pikes, but they do, obviously, as you can see, have large pikes with sword-like blades up top them. They have the same sorts of stats as the other one. There's their description of what they can do there. And again, reasonable stats, nothing amazing. The units of Dorwinion certainly aren't going to hold a candle to Gondor. So they are average Northmen, as you might expect. And then your first aggressive unit for the Thorn are the Thorn Bladesmen. But they are a bit more jack of all trades. They can defend as well as attack. So if you need a defensive line with a shield, then these are your guys. But otherwise, you'd use the Guard. Because as you know, DaC pikes are very powerful. I was going to say pikes in... Yeah, pikes in DaC. No, I think I was going to say DaCs in pike. That sounds like a name, doesn't it? DaCs and pike. Right, so we'll deal with those in a moment. You also get the Thorn Riders, your first cavalry unit. Not particularly a strong and aggressive cavalry unit, only a charge of 6, attack of 4, defense isn't that great. They're more of a hit the enemy's flanks, hit them in the rear, and then chase down the enemy. These will get shredded and annihilated by the Lokrim bodyguard. They won't do very well in a stand-up fight against the enemy bodyguard unit. And they also will lose out to most of the Easterlings' early game cavalry, the Horse Guard or Clan Guard, whatever it's called, and indeed the Raiders from Rune, the Archer Cav. And speaking of Archer Cav, this is the new unit for version 1.2, and it's totally unique. This is the only instance of this unit in the game. And that is the mounted Thorn crossbowman. Who would have thought it? So crossbows mounted on a horse. So because many people were saying that they were struggling with dealing with the chariots, dealing with the heavy armor in the early game of Rune, and the crossbowmen are your main way to do that. But crossbows are quite rare, they're difficult to get, and they fire so slowly you can often not take full advantage of them. So the answer came in making them mobile. And mounted Thorn crossbowmen. I know I don't like the name mounted or dismounted, but there really is nothing else you could probably call these, let's be honest. So mounted Thorn crossbowmen takes the name. And they are just crossbows on a horse. Now their missile is a lot lower than the crossbowmen on foot. Let's call that a bespoke horse crossbow that's just not as good. But they still are effective against armor, so they're still going to be powerful for you, but they're just not as good as your on-foot crossbowmen. And indeed, in the early game, nothing really is. So that's everything that you're going to get before the barracks event. Your whole army are the Thorn units supported where you can with hordes of these rabbles. Now, hordes and hordes of archers is always useful because more arrows just means more penetration, and it also staggers the enemy. The enemy staggers when it comes under arrow fire. So lots of arrows is always useful, but these guys are nothing more than, sadly, arrow fodder, or use these to tie up the chariots while you ping crossbows into them. And that is what I would suggest. Interestingly, though, the militia... Oh, it's because he's our captain, yeah. There's a captain of Dorwinion. So that's what a captain would look like. A general is a take on this guy here. But that is the officer of Dorwinion. So, but I believe if we head over to the elves... Yeah, they have their own unique elven officer. And there he is with his awesome half pauldron. I really like that. So, anyway, we'll come on to the elves in a moment. So, after the barracks event, the first unit that you're all going to get are the Dorwinion men-at-arms. And here they are. They are just a straightforward improvement over the Thorn Bladesmen. So more defense, slightly more attack, one more charge, and better sort of stats overall. So they are literally just a better version of Thorn Bladesmen. They can go on the offensive, but they're most primarily used to just hold the line. So if you choose humans, we'll deal with the humans first. Because there are other consequences to the lower units if you choose the elves, so we'll deal with that in a moment. If you choose humans, you also then get the Dorwinion Protectors. And the Dorwinion Protectors are just a high strike infantry. Not high strike, sorry. They're strike infantry. So same sort of defense as the men-at-arms, but they have a much higher attack, much higher charge. They're not effective against armor, though. So they're just raw strike infantry. But they haven't changed really since the last one. Supported with them, and the first real units of the human side are the Regent Spear Guard, named for the Vine Regent, your lord. So these are the Regent Spear Guard, and they are your first real defensive hold-the-line unit, because they're spearmen with a shield, which is always a good hold-the-line holding unit, other than pikes. But again, they haven't changed since 0.52, so there are their stats. Their defense is much, much better, much, much higher. Do remember as well that defense and a unit's design doesn't always match up 100% to what its stats would entail. And that's often because whilst we have the vision for the faction, sometimes we don't have the necessary skills to match the vision of the stats to the vision of the unit. So in a great deal of cases, you'll see a unit like these gentlemen, because I say this because these people have been called into question before. They have a 20 defense stat, but people have pointed out they're barely wearing any armor. So how can they have that? And you just have to sometimes eschew your realism helmet for the fact that we need to have the tiers in the armies. So they fill that tier. Right, a very, very powerful unit coming in for the Regent on the human side of the Regent Axe Guard. These are effective against armor with an 8 attack and 14 defense. Now, in terms of raw damage, they are lower than the Protectors, but they are armor piercing. Gives you a massive advantage. So again, 2 units of strike infantry if you choose the humans. It gives the humans a more aggressive vibe. If you were to sum them up into one, the humans would be numbers and aggression, and the elves would be defense and ambush. So that's kind of also the split, which does just give you that nice feel. There's a nice clear distinction. Also, again, impacting on the effective against armor side of choosing human are the Regent Bowguard. They're Bowguard, but they do use a crossbow. And they have a 12 attack stat effective against armor. They are outrageously good. Very, very good crossbows. Very good indeed. Their stats, though, haven't really changed. Neither has their purpose. And then coming to the elite units you get as the humans, these are all tied in, as again, to the fan fiction lore that I've written for Dorwinion. And these are the Paladins of the Vintner Court, riding particularly cool white horses with purple motifs. And their dismounted counterpart, the Knights of the Vintner Court. Rising to the rank of Paladin gives you a horse. So the Knights and the Paladins are just straight up melee attackers, really. The Knights, once again, are just a better version of Men-at-Arms and a better version of Thorn Bladesmen. They're just sword and shield infantry with a high attack, high defense, and good stats. Their morale isn't locked, though, so they will run away if need be. And then supporting them are your Paladins, the cavalry, the heaviest cavalry Dorwinion has by your leader. And these are very good. Attack of 12, a charge of 8, and total defense of 23. Now, these aren't effective against other cavalry, and they don't have a spear, so their initial charge can be a little hindered by that. But then once they're in there, they'll do very, very well indeed. But they are... I know no cavalry is really a prolonged melee cav, but if any of them are, then this is one of the ones that would fall into that category. You don't have to worry as much about leaving them in as you might other units. So then we move on to the elves, and this is the breakup for the elves. Now, the elves have a much more rugged and kind of grim vibe, owing to the Avari always being linked in people's minds to A, evil, and B, like a shadowy nation we don't know much about. So they've got more of a hidden-y vibe. And indeed, their Avari shadows, another elven ranger, can hide anywhere. So very, very key on the ambush front there. But starting us off are the Avari Guard, and look how cool they look. They look so good. Well done to Hummingbird for these guys. The Avari Guard are just straight up strike infantry on this side, but again not effective against armor, so you don't get that armor anti-armor trait. But like all elves, they have better morale, they have high attack and good defense. Supporting them are the Avari Shadows. The only thing that's different about these from 0.52, by the way, is the look of these 3 lower ones. The Avari Shadows aren't standing, so you can't see properly, but and they can hide anywhere. Their melee is 8, their missile is 7, they are elven rangers, so exceptional accuracy, a very long range, a lot of missiles, and again, good morale. Reasonably average defense stats, though, for an elf with that kind of attack and range and stuff, as with all rangers. So they can hide anywhere, perfect springing ambushes, and then they have an incredible range to back that up. And then going along with the ambush and sort of movement or kind of mobility side, not necessarily mobility actually, it's not really mobility, but going along with the ambush front are the Avari Naharim. And Avari Naharim, again, named and the description created by me, they're named after Nahar, which is the horse of Arome. So even though they didn't actually go on the Great Journey, they've named their cavalry after Arome's horse. They're just ranged archers. They're just ranged. Of course, archers are ranged. They are just ranged cav. So their defense is all right. Their charge bonus is still 6. And their melee is 9. So they are still reasonably aggressive. But obviously, you're going to be mostly using these to pepper and annoy the enemy. Now, do remember that the Easterlings of Rune have their own archer cav. So you will be dueling with them sometimes, I should imagine. And if you come up against the Variags, you'll be woefully outclassed, even with the Naharim. But then what people really choose the elves for normally are the 2 units of Eldar, the Avari Eldar Archers and the Avari Eldar Pikemen. Here, fully cementing the theory that Dorwinion is a defensive nation. The Avari Eldar Pikemen are very powerful. These are certainly in the upper echelons. They're along with the Guards of Imladris and the Khazad-dûm elite pikemen, whose name escapes me. These are probably one of the top pikeman units in the game. So I would suggest these are the third best pike unit in the game. An 8 attack, 24 defense. They've got a reasonable amount of soldiers as well. Excellent stats. Again, there's the stats not locked, so they will run away. But then you've also got the Elder Archers backing them up, who are up there with like the Elder Rinway Archers. Elves tend to always have archers, very good ones at that. So you get good stats again from the elves, and accuracy is very high. The range is only 10 behind the shadows. They're really quite good. But before we cover the bodyguard, I did just want to say, if you choose the elves, you will not only unlock the elves, but you will unlock an extra tier in your blacksmith. And if you then upgrade your thorn units at any of these the highest tier blacksmiths, then all of the metal, the grey metal that you see on them, changes to gold to match the golden armor of the elder. So you get a visual change throughout your main rank and file if you choose the elves, and every single thorn unit is affected by this if upgraded at the blacksmith. So you get a visual indication that you've changed, which is pretty damn cool in my opinion. But then one of your key units in the early game are the High Paladins, the leaders of the Dorwinion war against Rune. As you can see, they even use the Easterling horse, but changed into their own colour palette. But they do ride a different horse from the Paladin, so they are clearly and evidently different units, save that they are just wearing the same armour, of course. But the High Paladins are your bodyguard unit, and they are very, very good in the early game. Again, they're not the greatest with their charge, and their morale is actually only good. So they're not going to be outrageous, and they won't stand up to the Lokrim in a stand-up fight. The Lokrim have these every single time. No contest. So you do have to be a bit cautious with them. But they are still formidable cavalry in the early game. One of the few cavalry units that actually hasn't been like reduced and culled with our number culling. Obviously they've been reduced a little, but nowhere near as severely as those of Rohan and Dol Amroth. But that is your entire roster. So if we put everything in a line over here, group them all together, bring back the control, and then go for it, lads. Get on it. So we're up against a force of Rune. Oh, I've double pressed that. There we are, they're all gone. So these are the armies of Rune once again. Haven't we fought against these before? Did I do a Dale overview and fought against Rune? I can't remember. They've got their own crossbows bringing to the fray. There's their clan guard from the early game. Quite a few of those. I again just let the AI, I just click the AI autofill button. And there's the bodyguard we speak of, the Lokrim. The greatest threat to Dorwinion in the game, especially at the beginning. And there's their standard counterpart, the Lokinasrim. There aren't any chariots, I don't think, this time around. Unless they've already charged us and I can't see them. Paladins running around out there. Who's that over there? Oh, that's the High Paladins. Why are you sending them out on their death? Well, you stupid computer. Oh, their catapult's getting some good hits. There's the Candish Raiders. Variags who are fighting with the Easterlings rather than with their own nation. But they've been blunted by the Paladins. As the rest of the army panics. I'm not sure what the rest of the army is doing. Let's speed it up till they actually fight each other. They're having a really bad day. The AI versus the AI is ridiculous. It's almost a slaughter. Dragon's Wrath Guildmen channeling the power of the dragons into their army. But the Elder Pikemen are running across to help fight the Lok Scion. We're up against the Thorn. I'm pretty sure the Thorn used the halberd animation, not the pike animation. Can't quite remember. And the one key difference between the pike and the halberd animation is the halberd animation includes a swing motion as well as a stab. We'll see if we can get one. I'm pretty sure he just did it. Let's see if we can get someone else to do it again. A pike just does a stab. It just does a stab. But a halberd has a swing attack, as if using an axe on a long pole, which is basically what a halberd is. And it weakens their animation and thus weakens the unit full stop, really. But I expect Run will win this because they had 10,000 gold to play with, so all their units have more experience, they've all got armor and melee upgrades, and they get... I've chosen just one of every unit. As I said, the Dorwinion do get a Thala Rangers, but they didn't fit on for the Dorwinion selection, and they're more a Dale unit that Dorwinion's allowed to train, so I'm pretty sure I haven't done a Dale video yet, so they'll be in the Dale video. Oh no, I wrote it down somewhere actually, I can tell you. No, Dale is next, in fact. There you go. So Dale is next. So you'll see the Athala Rangers in the next video. But I think that will do for this one. So thank you very much for watching, if indeed you have. I hope you've learned something about Dorwinion, and I do hope you enjoy playing with one of my favourite factions, and certainly enjoy playing with the new toys, the mounted version of the Thorn Crossbowman, who will really bring some rain and hell down on the forces of Rune. But for now, that will be all. So until we speak again, dear friends, Navar and Naden Pedamad Melonin, and farewell. Remains. Oh, and our general didn't die this time. Get in. I think he might run away instead. Let's end it before he dies. Oh, panicked. Navar and Naden Pedamad Melonin, and farewell.